the way of what is to come. You feel it before you can name it. A pressure behind the eyes, a faint tightening in the chest, as if something has leaned closer without making a sound. Nothing dramatic happens. No vision. No answer. Just the sense that a door you were not looking for has begun to loosen its frame. You remain where you are, but something inside you has shifted its weight. The world still looks familiar. Objects keep their outlines. Your thoughts continue their ordinary procession, and yet a subtle dissonance hums beneath it all, like a note held too long. You sense that what once carried meaning with ease now hesitates. Explanations feel thinner. Certainties feel borrowed. It is not despair. It is not clarity. It is the moment just before either becomes possible. You may notice a quiet image repeating itself. A path half seen at dusk. A mirror that reflects more shadow than face. A river whose surface refuses to stay still. These images do not announce themselves as symbols. They simply arrive, uninvited, and linger. You do not summon them. They seem to have found you on their own. There is a feeling of being addressed, though no voice speaks aloud. Something in you has begun to listen, even if you do not yet know to what. This listening is not intentional. It arises the way breath does when the body remembers itself. You are not searching. You are being approached. The habits of your mind respond, as they always have. They ask for reasons. They look for context. They want to stabilize the ground. But the ground does not answer. It waits. And in this waiting, you begin to sense the presence of another order, one that does not rush to clarify, one that does not justify itself. A faint unease settles in, not sharp enough to alarm you, not soft enough to ignore. It carries the texture of nightfall, that hour when the forest seems to lean inward, when familiar paths lose their edges. You are still standing at the threshold. Nothing has been demanded of you yet. Nothing has been explained. You feel both smaller and more exposed, as if some protective layer has thinned without tearing. The usual measure by which you judge yourself begins to falter. Success and failure grow quiet. Even the question of who you are seems to pause, suspended between breaths. This is not an invitation you accepted. It is one you have noticed. Something has crossed into awareness, not to instruct, not to console, but to be present. It does not ask you to follow. It does not promise light. It simply remains, patient and close, waiting for you to feel that you are no longer alone inside yourself. You step forward without moving. The threshold dissolves behind you, not as a memory, but as a sensation that no longer applies. The air feels thicker here, as if thought itself has weight. Images begin to press closer, not as metaphors, but as presences. A forest opens around you, dense and unlit, its paths winding without promise of return. You do not choose a direction. The forest has already chosen you. Voices do not speak in sentences. They arrive as pressures, as moods, as sudden reversals of feeling. What you once trusted now hesitates. What you dismissed now stares back with quiet insistence. You sense that something within you has its own gravity, its own tempo, and it does not align with the rhythm you learned to call yourself. This is not chaos for its own sake. It is a different order, one that does not explain itself to the surface. You feel the familiar habits of judgment rise up, ready to classify, to measure, to regain balance. They flicker like torches at the edge of the woods, but each attempt to name what is happening seems to thin the experience rather than clarify it. Meaning slips away when grasped too quickly. The forest responds not to force, but to presence. A mirror appears, not hanging, not held, simply there. You look, expecting distortion, expecting revelation. Instead, you see fragments. A face that feels yours but older, or younger, or perhaps timeless. an expression you do not remember choosing. The mirror does not accuse. It does not reassure. It reflects without mercy and without intent. You sense opposition everywhere. Light presses against shadow. Order leans into disorder. Silence carries more weight than speech. These are not enemies. They exist too close together to be separated. When you try to favor one, the other deepens. When you attempt to banish darkness, it thickens into substance. The psyche here does not reward purity. It insists on wholeness, even when wholeness feels unbearable. A river cuts through the terrain, dark and slow. Its surface reflects stars you do not recognize. You feel the urge to cross, to reach the other side where something might finally make sense. But the river resists interpretation. It does not offer a bridge. It invites neither courage nor retreat. It simply flows, carrying fragments of memory, desire, fear, and forgotten tenderness in its current. You realize that much of what you call yourself belongs to a narrower band of awareness, shaped by habit, praise, survival. Here, that band feels thin, almost translucent. Beneath it moves something older, less concerned with coherence. It does not argue. It does not persuade. It waits, confident in its own persistence. Images begin to repeat. Fire appears, not as destruction, but as a slow-consuming warmth that asks what you are willing to let go of without promise of return. A temple emerges, not built of stone, but of attention, where every thought becomes audible, every impulse exposed. You feel both invited and judged, though no judgment is spoken. There is no teacher here, no doctrine, no reassurance that what you are encountering is safe or necessary. The experience does not adapt itself to your comfort. It unfolds according to a deeper rhythm, one that does not consult your preferences. You begin to sense that resistance itself is part of the encounter, that even your refusal has been anticipated. Night deepens, not as darkness alone, but as intimacy. The kind of night where boundaries soften and distinctions blur. You feel watched, not by an external presence, but by something within that knows you without explanation. It sees your hunger for meaning and your fear of losing yourself to it. It does not choose between them. The forest breathes. The river continues. The mirror remains. You are no longer oriented by direction or outcome. You are oriented by contact. Each image presses against you, not to teach, but to be endured. This descent does not ask you to understand. It asks you to stay, to remain present as the symbolic field closes around you, alive, autonomous, and unwilling to be reduced to sense alone. You begin to notice how the body responds before the mind has time to interfere. A tightening in the throat when a certain image returns. A warmth in the chest when another lingers a moment longer than expected. These reactions do not ask for interpretation. They arrive as facts, quiet and undeniable, like weather moving through an open field. You are inside the experience now, not observing it from a safe distance. The forest seems closer, almost intimate. Branches brush against you without resistance. You feel how easily you confuse movement with progress, how quickly you assume that walking forward means leaving something behind. Here, every step feels like a circling. The same images reappear, altered only slightly, as if testing your capacity to remain present without demanding novelty. You sense a figure nearby, not clearly formed, not separate enough to be named. It carries your gestures, your doubts, your familiar ways of shrinking and reaching. When you turn toward it, it turns as well. When you hesitate, it pauses. You realize that confrontation here does not mean opposition. It means proximity. The closer you stand, the less distinction remains. A fire glows at the edge of the clearing. It does not blaze. It does not threaten. It consumes slowly, methodically, without drama. You notice what it draws toward itself. Old ambitions, borrowed ideals, versions of yourself shaped by approval rather than necessity. The fire does not ask permission. It burns what has already loosened its hold on you. Thoughts rise up, attempting to narrate what is happening. They want to rescue you with coherence. They suggest meanings, lessons, outcomes. Each suggestion fades as soon as it forms. The symbolic field does not respond to explanation. It responds to endurance. You begin to sense that staying with the image, without translating it, allows something subtler to emerge. A door appears where there was none before. It stands slightly open, revealing neither light nor darkness beyond it. You feel the familiar impulse to prepare yourself, to decide whether you are ready. But readiness seems irrelevant here. The door exists because it exists. Crossing it would not grant clarity. It would only deepen the conversation already underway. You notice how judgment softens when it no longer has a clear object. Without categories to cling to, it loses momentum. What remains is a kind of listening that does not strain. You are not trying to extract meaning from the experience. You are allowing meaning to press back against you, shaping you from the inside. The mirror returns, now closer. You see expressions pass across your face that you do not remember choosing. Weariness, longing, a strange relief. None of them stay long enough to be claimed. You understand that identity here is fluid, more like a current than a structure. Trying to fix it would only interrupt the flow. You feel the presence of something larger than your usual sense of self, not above you, not below you, but surrounding and permeating. It does not inflate you. It humbles you. You sense how small your personal narratives are within this wider field, and how precious they remain nonetheless. Nothing is discarded. Everything is recontextualized. As this realization settles, it does not resolve the tension you carry. It deepens it. You feel both held and exposed, both diminished and expanded. The psyche does not move toward comfort here. It moves toward truth as experience, not as conclusion. And you remain within it, breathing, listening, allowing the next cycle to form without demanding that it arrive quickly. The rhythm changes almost imperceptibly. Nothing new announces itself, yet everything feels slightly rearranged, as if the same room has been entered from another angle. You notice how the images no longer rush toward you. They wait. Their patience feels deliberate, almost instructive, though no instruction is given. The silence between moments grows thicker, more articulate than speech. The river returns to the center of awareness. You are no longer tempted to cross it. Instead, you find yourself watching how it moves, how it carries fragments of you without asking for ownership. Reflections drift past, memories without narrative, emotions without explanation. You recognize them, not by content, but by texture. They feel lived, even when you cannot place them in time. A sense of opposition stirs again, but it no longer feels hostile. Light and shadow move closer, overlapping rather than colliding. You realize how much effort you have spent trying to separate them, believing that clarity depends on exclusion. Here, clarity emerges from coexistence. The tension does not dissolve. It becomes inhabitable. You feel the presence of a voice that is not verbal. It does not argue or persuade. It simply presses forward, steady and indifferent to your preferences. When you resist, it does not push harder. It waits until resistance exhausts itself. You sense that this voice has outlasted many versions of you, and will outlast many more. Images of order surface, shelves neatly arranged, systems aligned, goals defined. They carry a familiar comfort, yet when they appear here, they feel fragile, almost provisional. They seem to ask for something in return, a sacrifice of depth, a narrowing of vision. You feel the cost immediately, even before any choice is made. The forest opens into a clearing that feels less like a place and more like a pause. You stand without urgency. The need to progress fades. In its place arises a quiet attentiveness, the kind that does not seek reward. You notice how this attentiveness allows contradictions to remain unresolved without strain. A memory surfaces, not specific, but emotional. The feeling of having once known something intimately and then forgotten it in order to function. The feeling carries both loss and necessity. You understand that forgetting was not a failure. It was a condition of survival. Yet remembering now feels equally necessary, even if it complicates everything. The fire appears again, lower now, closer to embers than flame. Its heat is gentle, persistent. It does not destroy. It refines. You sense how it alters what remains after the obvious has burned away. What survives feels quieter, less eager to announce itself. It carries a weight that does not need validation. You notice how the mirror no longer startles you. You glance into it without expectation. What you see does not surprise you, even though it continues to change. You recognize the familiarity of multiplicity. You are not one thing here. You never were. The realization does not fracture you. It steadies you. The experience does not crescendo. It deepens. The psyche seems less interested in revelation than in endurance. You feel how each return to the same symbols alters your relationship to them. They are no longer obstacles or guides. They are companions, persistent and alive, accompanying you as the descent continues, unhurried, unfinished, and quietly exacting. Something settles into place without announcing itself. Not an answer, not an insight you can carry away, but a shift in how you inhabit the experience. You feel less compelled to orient yourself. The need to know where you are fades, replaced by a willingness to remain where you are found. The symbolic field no longer presses against you with the same urgency. It surrounds you, steady and intimate. The forest feels familiar now, not because it has revealed its paths, but because you have stopped demanding that it do so. You sense how your attention has changed its quality. It is softer, less acquisitive. You are no longer gathering impressions. You are letting them pass through you, altering you in ways that do not announce themselves immediately. The door you noticed before is still there. It has not moved. It has not opened further. You realize that it no longer matters whether you cross it. Its presence alone has already done its work. It has unsettled the assumption that every threshold must be passed, that every possibility must be exhausted. Some doors exist to be acknowledged, not entered. A subtle grief moves through you, quiet and unadorned. It carries the weight of all the moments when you tried to outrun what was asking to be lived slowly. The grief does not accuse. It does not demand repair. It simply rests in awareness, allowed to be what it is without explanation. You notice how allowing its space changes its texture. It becomes less sharp, more spacious. The river seems closer again, though you have not approached it. You hear it now, a low continuous sound beneath everything else. It feels like time stripped of narrative, movement without destination. You sense how much of yourself has been shaped by resisting this sound, by insisting on beginnings and endings. Here, continuity takes precedence over resolution. Light filters through the forest in uneven patterns. It does not illuminate everything at once. It reveals fragments, then withdraws. You feel how this partial illumination mirrors your own awareness. Understanding arrives in flashes, never complete, never final. Each glimpse leaves something untouched, waiting for another angle, another return. The figure you sensed earlier feels closer now, less distinct, almost indistinguishable from you. You stop trying to locate it. You feel it instead, in the way your thoughts hesitate before forming, in the way emotion surfaces without narrative. You realize that opposition here has softened into intimacy. What once felt like another now feels like a depth you are learning to tolerate. The fire has almost gone out. What remains is warmth without spectacle. You feel how this warmth settles into your chest, not as excitement, but as steadiness. It does not motivate. It stabilizes. It asks nothing. It remains. You sense how the symbolic field has altered you without ceremony. You are not enlightened. You are not healed. You are simply less defended. The images continue to exist independently of you. They have not been absorbed or mastered. They coexist with you now, shaping your interior landscape without demanding acknowledgement. As this cycle completes itself, there is no sense of arrival, only continuity. The psyche does not signal that it is finished speaking. It pauses as if taking a breath, preparing not for an ending, but for a different kind of return, one that carries everything that has been endured into a quieter, more integrated presence. The atmosphere tightens without becoming heavy. You feel it as a gathering rather than a push, like air drawn slowly into a lung that knows how to wait. Nothing accelerates. Nothing resolves. Yet something concentrates, as if all the images that have followed you are leaning inward, listening to one another through you. The forest does not recede. It grows quieter. Leaves no longer rustle to announce themselves. Paths remain indistinct, but their ambiguity no longer troubles you. You sense that disorientation has shifted its meaning. It is no longer a lack of direction. It is a suspension of the need for direction at all. Light and shadow mingle more intimately now. They no longer alternate. They coexist within the same breath. You notice how this changes your inner posture. There is less reaching, less recoil. The tension you once felt between opposites has not disappeared. It has softened into a kind of steady pressure, like hands resting firmly on your shoulders, grounding rather than restraining. The river feels closer than ever, though it still does not invite crossing. Its sound deepens, not louder, but fuller. You sense that it carries everything without discrimination, joy and dread, memory and anticipation, longing and fatigue. You recognize yourself in this movement, not as an identity, but as a continuity that has survived many names. A mirror appears again, but this time you do not look for yourself within it. You notice instead how it reflects the space around you, the forest, the river, the fire's last glow. You realize that the mirror has never been only about self-recognition. It has been about relationship, about how inner and outer exchange their roles when attention deepens. The feeling of being addressed returns, stronger now, but still without words. It does not seek agreement. It does not seek obedience. It seeks contact. You sense how much of your life has been shaped by avoiding this kind of contact, by preferring clarity over presence, explanation over endurance. Here, those preferences loosen on their own. A memory surfaces of standing alone at night, long ago or perhaps not so long ago, when the world felt vast and indifferent and strangely intimate at the same time. That memory blends with the present moment until you cannot tell which came first. Time folds inward, not collapsing, but layering itself, depth upon depth. The fire, nearly gone, flickers once more. Not higher, just brighter for a moment. You feel what remains after burning is complete. Not purity, not emptiness, a residue of attention, refined by staying rather than escaping. You sense how this attention does not belong to you alone. It feels shared, as if many lives have passed through this same interior terrain. The figure you once perceived as other is no longer locatable. You feel it as a presence distributed throughout your body, in the way your breathing has slowed, in the way your thoughts no longer rush to define themselves. You realize that what frightened you at first was not its difference, but its familiarity. There is a pressure now, subtle but undeniable. Not to act, not to decide, to remain open without becoming diffuse, to hold the field without grasping it. You sense how rare this posture is, how quickly it is usually replaced by movement or conclusion. Here it is sustained, not by effort, but by trust in the process itself. The symbols you have encountered gather without merging. The forest, the river, the mirror, the fire, the door, none of them collapse into a single meaning. They form a constellation, not a system. Their coherence arises from proximity, not hierarchy. You feel how this constellation mirrors the structure of your own inner life, fragmented yet whole, unresolved yet alive. A quiet lucidity emerges, not sharp, not triumphant. It feels like standing in early morning light before the day asserts its demands. You are aware of your limits without being confined by them. You are aware of depth without needing to plummet further. The psyche feels less like a problem to be solved and more like a landscape to be inhabited. The intensity does not peak. It steadies. The crescendo is not a climax but a fullness, a saturation of presence that leaves no single point emphasized. You sense how easily this state could be lost, how quickly the familiar rhythms of judgment and urgency might return. Yet for now, they remain at a respectful distance. You remain within the field, neither advancing nor retreating. The symbols breathe around you. The silence thickens, not as absence, but as containment. And in this containment, you feel the weight of something enduring, something that does not seek to be finished, something that will continue to speak long after this moment has softened back into the ordinary texture of your days. You do not leave this place. It loosens its hold instead. The forest does not vanish. It recedes into a subtler register, as if it has learned how to live behind your eyes. The river continues to move, not away from you, but within you, carrying its sound into quieter hours. You feel it most when nothing else is asking for your attention. There is a gentleness now, not relief, not resolution, but a softening of the inner posture that once strained to hold everything together. You notice how the need to conclude has faded. The urge to translate experience into meaning no longer presses as hard. Something has shifted from grasping to accompanying. The mirror remains, though you no longer seek it out. At times it appears without warning, in the face of another, in a sudden memory, in the way light falls across a familiar room. When it does, it reflects less of who you think you are and more of how you are relating. You sense that this was always its function, to reveal movement rather than form. The door is still there. It has not opened further. It has not closed. You understand now that it was never meant to be crossed in the way you once imagined. Its presence continues to remind you that not every threshold demands passage. Some exist to interrupt certainty, to keep the psyche from hardening around fixed conclusions. You feel the fire as warmth rather than flame. It lingers in your chest, steady and unobtrusive. It does not urge you toward transformation. It simply maintains a temperature in which transformation remains possible. You sense how easily this warmth could be ignored, how often it has been in the past, yet it does not withdraw because of that. The symbols do not disperse. They settle into a quieter orbit, less visible but no less alive. They will return when called, and when not called at all. You understand that their autonomy is essential. They are not tools. They are presences. They belong to a depth that does not consult your plans. You notice how the world feels slightly altered as you turn back toward it. Not brighter, not darker, just less final. Conversations carry more layers. Silences feel less empty. Even conflict seems to open inward rather than outward, revealing tensions that do not ask to be resolved immediately. There is no instruction offered now, no final orientation. What remains is a quality of listening that has learned how to endure ambiguity without collapsing into confusion. You feel this listening when you pause before speaking, when emotion arises without explanation, when an image surfaces and you allow it to stay unclarified. You sense the continuation of the dialogue, not as an obligation, but as a fact of inner life. The unconscious does not retreat because you have listened once. It continues to move, to shape, to respond. What has changed is not its activity, but your willingness to remain in relationship with it. This relationship does not promise peace. It offers contact. It does not guarantee meaning. It sustains presence. You feel how easily it could be drowned out by noise, by urgency, by the familiar demand to be certain. Yet you also sense how resilient it is, how patiently it waits beneath those demands. As this moment loosens its shape, you do not carry it away as a lesson. You carry it as a resonance. It will return in fragments, in dreams, in moments when the world feels slightly misaligned. When it does, you may recognize the feeling, not as something new, but as something that has been with you all along. You remain here, even as you move on. The forest breathes. The river flows. The mirror reflects. The fire holds its warmth. And somewhere within this quiet continuity, the conversation continues, unhurried, unfinished, alive.